The streets were famously cobbled. Not a new invention by any means, but the dwarfs toiled and found pride in the streets themselves. In the depths of the Temple of Death was a loyal monk by the name of Lorbom Cloister Elbows. He had tended the below-ground catacombs for quite some time. Other than preparing the bodies for burial and maintaining the old tombs, he spent his time fishing along the Great Bear River. Oh, how the water carried all your worries away to the sea. Not just any sea, though. This was the Iron Sea, famously named by the dwarves so long ago, it's hard to recount when. It was mostly bass in this part of the river where Lorbom found himself in his 164 years on this mortal coil. Although he deeply enjoyed the taste of fresh fish, the game wardens made it abundantly clear that he'd have to throw the catches back. He counted compatriots in his off time, and cherished each one that he knew, never straying too far from Tarim, his personal deity. You see, Tarim was an age-old deity of mysterious whims and powers. He could feel the protection of Tarim whenever he would polish his worry stone with his fingers. Maybe one day he'll grind it to dust with how often he found himself worrying about the well-being of those around him. Lorbom wore his heart on his sleeve, but was most often lacking in mental fortitude. His fly fishing rod skimmed the surface of the water lazily. He threw himself back and forth as he glanced at the water. It seemed to soak up the emotion his parents made him move out upon maturity, usually around 160 for dwarves. He thought that was plenty of time to be under the roof of another, always looking forward to a new honey dream he could hold on to. Through Tarim, there wasn't much Lorbom couldn't do in his mind. The rent was cheap, he had a job, heck, even had spare time to fish. So why did days like today feel like he was missing something? Always lingering, in the daylight he examined his calloused hands. Marks of a good dwarf, he thought. Surely the toil would make his ancestors proud, the little amount he thought he provided to the town. Iron Hollow was also home to some rather wealthy traders and politicians that hailed from the heartland directly. Tarim would call these folks the Sun Kissers. They always moved down when it was cold up north, and then moved back up to the ancient mountains when the weather was fair there. Old and new coin-havers alike followed such cyclical patterns. Lorbom looked around at his meager abode and took in the smell around him. The wood was new, so it still had the faint sniff of well-taken-care-of planks, and the floor wasn't too shabby either. A small charcoal burning stove sat in the corner of the room. There was a large hole in the bottom for stuffing fresh coals and wood for warmth. The fire was out today, and there wasn't a stew brewing. Something that could easily be fixed by visiting the market. Dusting himself off for good measure, he walked out the door, back into the town streets. The market was a little slow right now, since everyone was either eating or taking a break. He approached a vegetable stall and perused the selection. He grabbed 2 pepper onions, a few stalks of celery, a pound or 2 of potatoes, and some fresh bell peppers. He didn't often measure too keenly the weight of the goods he bought, counting on the good nature of a fellow dwarf for a good bargain. He paid and went. Got back to the stew pot in no time and started to toss in all the ingredients and a gallon of water. On one side of the small bungalow was a rack of some spices he had purchased from a traveler not too long ago, adding a pinch of deep salt for flavor and a little bit of cave cumin for a little kick. Making sure to stir while it got brought to a boil, he licked his lips in anticipation of his midday meal. Not far too long after, he took the pot off the main fire source from the stove construction to let it cool a little before he poured it into his one bowl. Lorbom paced the floor, ever so patient for a good hearty soup. Finally, he ladled some of the soup into a bowl, and with his favorite bronze spoon he dug in. The hearty meal would stick to his ribs for the rest of the day. After drinking in the flavors of his hometown, he stepped outside again. Looking around, he didn't have much of a plan for the rest of the day, so he decided to take a walk. Changing from his fishing sandals into his leather walking boots, and he got started on a decent pace back to the center of town, where the famous tavern was waiting for him. Along the way, he passed by some of the mercantile shops, ones with fine silks to weave into shirts and pants. A pricey material from a faraway land, said to have been inhabited by humans, but he had never seen one in his life. It almost seemed like a comfortable bubble that he found himself in during the broad daylight. Not a pinprick of doubt in his body, he strode into the tavern. Not too many people turned their heads to see who walked in through the double doors. With his coin purse at his side, he took a seat at the next available table and started to think back to his younger days. He was only 16, a small lad when he thought he had found true love. Now as an adult, he found it to be a sweet sensation that he could cherish from time to time. Not of celebrity status among his peers, he enjoyed a small bit of anonymity that was provided by the welcoming environment of the tavern he enjoyed so much. Fresh brews aplenty on tap, a serving wench approached him, with a smile on her face, already with a flagon in hand. "Here you go. Compliments of the house," she said as she placed the ale in front of him.
"Really now?"
he said in his gruff, back-of-the-throat voice.
"Of course. You take care of our paragons, and we keep an eye out for you."
She smiled yet again and left him to his devices. Taking the drink past his lips, he mindfully absorbed the ale into his person. He thought to himself,
"This is the life,"
as the first gulp got down his gullet.